Song of the Empty Bottles. This used to be a library book. By Osmond, Molarsky. Illustrated by Tom Feelings. This book was published in 1968. Thaddeus went to the neighborhood house after school whenever he felt like it to make pictures with crayons or finger paints, play ping pong, and have fun. Some days he felt like it, and some days he did not. But he never missed going on Thursday, because on that afternoon, Mr. Andrews came to sing songs with his guitar. Some of the songs were happy, and some were sad, and the children all sang along with Mr. Andrews, all but Thaddeus, who made his mouth go but did not sing out loud, because he would rather listen. He did not want to miss hearing one single boom of Mr. Andrews' deep voice or a single pling-plong of his guitar. Instead, he waited until he was alone. Then, he sang the songs by himself. Sometimes when he was singing, Thaddeus thought of songs that he had never heard before. My mama goes away all day, my mama goes away all day, my mama goes away all day. Then Thaddeus wished more than he wished for anything else in the world, that he had a guitar to make the wonderful pling-plong sounds go along with his singing, the way Mr. Andrews did. One day, when all the children were crowded around, Mr. Andrews said, "The boy in the back there, I don't think I know your name." The other children looked around at Thaddeus, and Thaddeus looked behind him to see who Mr. Andrews was talking to. "No, I mean you, young fellow. Come inside the circle. I want to talk to you." He was looking right at Thaddeus. "That's right. Come here." Thaddeus felt hot and cold and frightened. He loved Mr. Andrews, but he had never dared go up and talk to him and lean against him as some of the others did. But now the circle opened in front of him, and slowly he came near. "What's your name?" Mr. Andrews asked. Thaddeus put his head down and said in a soft voice, "Thaddeus." "I didn't quite hear that," Mr. Andrews said. "Thaddeus!" the other children screamed. "His name is Thaddeus." "I want to hear it from this man, young man himself," said Mr. Andrews, as he put his arm around Thaddeus's shoulders. Then Thaddeus spoke right up and said, "Thaddeus, now will you tell me why you make believe you are singing in the back there, when you're not really singing at all?" "I like to hear you sing," Thaddeus said, "and if I sing, then I can't hear you." Mr. Andrews looked surprised and tried not to smile. "Well, I am flattered, but you would have fun singing along with the others if you tried it." "I have fun hearing. I sing when I'm by myself." The other children were beginning to drift away, and after a while only Thaddeus was there with Mr. Andrews. Suddenly he reached out and touched the strings of Mr. Andrews' guitar. "Here, hold it," Mr. Andrews said, and he put the guitar in Thaddeus' arms just the right way. Thaddeus drew his thumb across the strings 4 times. Strum, 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 strum. Each time he could feel the whole guitar tremble in his arms, and he could hear the strings ring in his ears like a million bells. He said very softly, "How much is a guitar?" "This one cost a great deal of money, $100. Why do you want to know?" "I want to have a guitar," Thaddeus said, "but you don't know how to play one." "I could learn." Mr. Andrews looked hard at Thaddeus. At last he said, "I just happen to know someone who has a very nice guitar that he will sell for $15. Do you suppose you could get $15 to buy a guitar with?" "I don't know," Thaddeus said, and he got up and walked quickly out of the neighborhood house, straight up the hill and home, where he waited for his mother to come home from work. "What have you got inside you?" his little sister Bernadine asked. Even when Thaddeus was only sitting quietly on the front steps, his sister could always tell when he had something on his mind. "Nothing much," Thaddeus said. "Tell me." "I want to buy a guitar," he said. "Will you let me play it?" "Sometimes, if you're careful." "I'll be careful," Bernadine said. After a while, their mother came up the hill and turned in the little iron gate. She sat down on the front steps to catch her breath. "Have you children been good today?" "Yes," Bernadine said. "Thaddeus wants to buy a guitar." "A guitar? What would you want with a guitar?" "I want to play it and sing with it." "That's for big kids. You're too small to play a guitar." "Can he?" Bernadine asked, following her mother into his house. "Can he what?" "Can he get a guitar?" "How much is a guitar?" $100, Thaddeus said. "Are you out of your mind, boy?" "But I can get one for $15. "Oh, that's different," his mother said. "No problem at all. You just go out in the yard and water that little banty tree every day for a week, and it will start growing dollar bills and quarters and dimes and nickels. Then you can pick them off and go downtown and buy anything you like. And while you're there, would you mind buying me a dress and some shoes?" Thaddeus knew this was his mom's way of saying they did not have $15 for a guitar. Not right now, or any other time for that matter. The next day, Thursday, after the story and singing time, Thaddeus waited to talk to Mr. Andrews. He told him how much he still wanted the guitar. "Did you ever think of trying to earn some money?" Mr. Andrews asked. "Well, how could I earn some money?" "Oh, I don't know. Running errands? Doing chores for people in your neighborhood?" "People in my neighborhood don't have any more money than my mama," Thaddeus said. "They do their own chores and run their own errands." "Yes," said Mr. Andrews, "of course." "I do earn money sometimes," Thaddeus said, "but only a little bit. Enough to buy an ice cream cone or a bottle of soda." "How do you earn that money?" "I collect empty bottles and take them back to the store. I collect old newspapers and take them to the shredding factory. They pay 10 cents for a whole wagon load." "Do you have a wagon?" "An old rickety wagon," said Thaddeus. "Well, if you collect enough wagon loads of old newspapers and find enough bottles, and if you don't spend the money for things to eat, but save it up, pretty soon you'll have enough to buy your guitar." "How soon?" "Well, if you start right away, maybe you can earn the money by the 4th of July. That's about 3 months. "I wish it was July right now," said Thaddeus. "Then you wouldn't have anything to look forward to." "I would have the guitar." "You win," said Mr. Andrews. "In the meantime, I'll teach you a little bit about how to play the guitar. We can use mine." Mr. Andrews showed Thaddeus how to rest the guitar on his lap, with his fingers of his left hand pressed down on the strings, and the fingers of his right hand plunking them. At first the strings cut into his fingers and hurt. It was hard to remember where to put his fingers to get the sound he wanted. Often he made mistakes and harsh sounds came from the strings. But he kept on trying, and every week after the other children went home, Mr. Andrews gave him a lesson. In time, Thaddeus learned 6 different ways to put his fingers down on the strings to make different chords. Each chord sounded different from all the others, and he loved every one of them. And no matter what note he sang, he could always find a chord on the guitar that made his song sound beautiful. More than ever, Thaddeus found himself making up songs as he practiced on Mr. Andrews' guitar. "It's a hot day, Mr. Fireman. Please open up the fire hydrant for us. It's a hot day, Mr. Fireman. Please open up the fire hydrant for us." "That's a nice song," Mr. Andrews said when Thaddeus sang it. "Maybe someday you'll make up a longer one." Thaddeus thought about that for a while. Then he said, "Yes, maybe I will." Not as much fun as learning to play the guitar was collecting bottles and newspapers. No matter where he went, Thaddeus kept his eyes open for empty bottles. He found them in parking lots and gutters and in trash cans. He found them in alleys and besides park benches. It was hard, slow work. And he often felt very discouraged. But then, Thaddeus discovered the tall apartment buildings that began a few blocks from his house. He heard that people lived in these buildings, left their empty bottles in incinerator closets on every floor. They left old newspapers there too. He asked the building superintendents if he could have the bottles and newspapers. Some said he couldn't, but some said he could. With his rickety wagon, he carted the bottles to the grocery store where he got refund money for them. He took the newspapers to the paper shredding factory on the street behind his house. He collected every day after school and on Saturdays and Sundays, and he saved all of the money he earned. He kept it in a peanut butter jar and didn't tell anyone about it, not even Bernadine. Every few days, Thaddeus dumped his money out on his bed to see how much he had. The pile of nickels and dimes grew very slowly, and after 8 weeks, he only had $4.71. It would take him forever to save $15. But then he thought about the guitar, and he put his money back in the peanut jar and went out again to find more bottles and newspapers. One Sunday afternoon, he went as usual to the Oxford house, which was 10 stories tall. Every Sunday for the past 8 weeks, he had taken the elevator to the 10th floor and looked in the closet. He would look in the closet on every floor, right down to the ground. He did the same thing in all the houses in the neighborhood. This Sunday afternoon, the doorman at the Oxford house wouldn't let him in. "Can't have you in the building," he said. Thaddeus left and went to the Cambridge house. The same thing happened there. "No boys allowed inside," the doorman said. "Go away." It was the same at the Eaton house, the Rugby house, the Wiltshire apartments, and the Hampshire house. "Go away. No boys allowed." That was the story everywhere. At the Embassy Gardens, the doorman said, "Sorry, young fella, can't let you in." "Why not?" "There've been some robberies around here." "Oh," said Thaddeus. "But I'm not a robber." "I know you're not. All the same, those are my orders. Sorry." Then a lady came out, and the doorman blew his whistle for a taxi, and Thaddeus went away. The next Thursday, Thaddeus went to the neighborhood house. At the end of the singing, he started to leave with the others, but Mr. Andrews stopped him. "Aren't you going to take your lessons today?" "I don't feel like it," Thaddeus said. "Why not?" Mr. Andrews asked. "What's the matter?" "Nothing much." "Oh, come on, tell me. I want to know." So Thaddeus said, "I can't get any more bottles from the apartment houses. They won't let me in. Now, I don't think I can ever find enough bottles to save up $15. Mr. Andrews didn't say anything. He just strummed quietly on his guitar, and Thaddeus could see that he was thinking. Finally, he said, "You don't care very much about collecting empty bottles, do you?" "No, I don't care about it at all." "What do you like to do?" Mr. Andrews asked. "I like to make songs and sing them." "That's what I thought. But you never really made up a whole song, have you? Like Blue Tail Fly or Oh, Susanna." "I guess not," said Thaddeus. "Well, why don't you try?" And Mr. Andrews, "Whenever I hear a new song, I write it down. Then I can save it and sing it wherever I want to. Here's what I'll do. If you make a song that I like, I'll pay you $10 for it. Then you will have enough money to buy the guitar and have a few dollars left over. Is that a bargain?" Thaddeus could hardly believe it. $10 for a song? It would take 500 bottles to get $10, and a ton of newspapers to get $9. A song was something you couldn't even see or touch. How could it be worth $10? Well, if Mr. Andrews said so, then it must be so. Thaddeus walked home thinking that he would make up a song that very night after he went to bed. Up until now, whenever Thaddeus made up a song, he did it without trying. It just came to him. He might be walking down the street and see something and make up a song about it. But when he went to bed and tried to make up a song, no song came. No matter how hard Thaddeus tried, day or night, walking, running, standing still, or laying down, no new song came to him. What he thought at first was going to be a quick way of earning $10 was turning out to be very hard. Maybe collecting bottles was the easier way after all. And so, once again, he began to keep a sharp lookout for bottles. He had only collected a few when he suddenly realized that he was singing, making up a new song, a song about empty bottles. The words in the tune came to him in bits and pieces. The first time was when he saw 3 bottles high on a wall. He had to wait for a tall boy to come along and get them down for him. I saw 3 bottles high on a wall. I wish that I was 6 feet tall. Thaddeus thought maybe he could put that in a song. Another time he put 9 bottles on the kitchen table and tapped each one with a spoon. Each bottle made a different sound, and Thaddeus discovered that he could play a tune on them. This gave him still another idea for a verse. I tapped some bottles with my spoon, and then I got this funny little tune. Making up a song wasn't so hard after all. Then he remembered that the songs Mr. Andrews sang had a chorus that came after every verse. What could the chorus be? Thaddeus thought. I can't even find bottles in the dark. And then he thought, that could be the chorus. Bottles in the alley, bottles in the park. If there is a bottle, I can find it in the dark. As Thaddeus continued to look for bottles, he thought of more verses for his song. Some were good, and he remembered them and put them in. Others, he decided, were not as good, and he just forgot them. At last, he thought his song was long enough. When Thursday came, he took his money jar, and he went to the neighborhood house. After all the children had gone, Thaddeus picked up Mr. Andrews' guitar and sang his song and played chords to go with it, to make his voice bounce and float along, high and sweet. I look for bottles everywhere. Where I find them, I don't care. Bottles in the alley, bottles in the park. If there is a bottle, I can find it in the dark. I saw 3 bottles high on a wall. I wished that I was 6 feet tall. Bottles in the alley, bottles in the park. If there is a bottle, I can find it in the dark. I tapped some bottles with my spoon and got this funny little tune. Bottles in the alley, bottles in the park. If there is a bottle, I can find it in the dark. I saw a bottle in the lake. I reached it with a big long rake. Bottles in the alley, bottles in the park. If there is a bottle, I can find it in the dark. After the first time, Mr. Andrews sang along with him on the chorus. Thaddeus could tell that Mr. Andrews liked the song, and he was not surprised. He liked the song himself. Then Mr. Andrews asked Thaddeus to sing it again. He took out a pad and pencil and wrote down the words and drew some lines and marked down some notes. All it needs now is a name, Mr. Andrews said. What do you think of calling it the Empty Bottle Song? I like that fine, Thaddeus said. And Mr. Andrews wrote it down. Thank you for the song, Mr. Andrews said. Then he took 10 $1 bills out of his wallet and handed them to Thaddeus. Just a minute. The guitar's in my car, Mr. Andrews said, and he went outside. Thaddeus emptied his jar of money on a chair, counted out $5, and put it with the 10 Mr. Andrews had given him. Now Mr. Andrews brought the guitar in, handling it with great care, and polished it up a little bit with his handkerchief. Thaddeus could hardly wait to hold it. Here's the $15, he said. Thank you, said Mr. Andrews. Here is your guitar. And he handed it to Thaddeus. How cool and smooth it felt. It shone like a mirror. And when Thaddeus drew his right thumb softly across the strings, the guitar trembled. It was smaller and lighter than Mr. Andrews' guitar, but just the right size for a boy. It did not have such a loud voice either, but it had a sweet voice. Thaddeus thought it was the sweetest sound he had ever heard. Thaddeus carried his guitar home more carefully than he would carry half a dozen eggs. He walked fast, but he didn't run, and he picked his feet up at curbs so he wouldn't trip. There at last was the iron gate to his yard, the scrawny little banty tree, the front stoop, the front door. Thaddeus set his guitar down on the kitchen table. He got a glass of water and drank it, then got another and went out and poured it on the banty tree. How did he know? Maybe the little tree was thirsty. Then he sat down on the front porch with his guitar and began to play. He played Blue Tail Fly, and he played Oh Susanna, and he played Go Down Moses. Pretty soon, people sitting in their windows and on their stoops across the street were singing along with him. Then Bernadine came home. She stopped outside the gate for just a minute, then came in and sat next to her brother. It was getting close to 6 o'clock. Any minute now. Their mother would be coming up the hill from work, out of breath and tired. Thaddeus was playing a song the neighbors didn't know, but they were catching on when he sang the chorus. Bottles in the alley, bottles in the park. If there is a bottle, I can find it in the dark. Thaddeus was singing a verse of the song as his mother reached the gate. She stood there, listening. I saw a bottle in the lake. I reached it with a big long rake. Then everybody joined in. Bottles in the alley, bottles in the park. If there is a bottle, I can find it in the dark. That was the end of the song, and Thaddeus' mother came through the gate. What are we going to have for supper? Said Thaddeus. Son, I see you got your guitar after all. Yes, Mama. Where'd you get all the money to buy it? Thaddeus almost said, I picked it off the little banty tree, Mama, but he didn't say it. He said, some of it I earned collecting bottles and papers, and some of it Mr. Andrews paid me for making up a song. Well, all I can say is you're going to come to a good end or a bad end. I don't know which. You mark my words. Now you go right on singing. I'll listen from inside. I'm going to fix some supper. Thaddeus drew his thumb over the strings 3 times and began to sing. But this time was a brand new song. He had begun to smell the dinner his mother was cooking, and it was making him very hungry. So hungry that his new song was all about food. Pancakes, cornflakes, squash and cherries, pickles, lemons, beans and berries. This is the food that I love to eat. I don't care if it's sour or sweet. Grapes and apples, bread and honey, stew and chicken, chocolate money. This is the food that I love to eat. I don't care if it's sour or sweet. His mother was calling him now. After dinner, he would make up more words for the new song, and then he could sing it for Mr. Andrews on Thursday. And this is where you can play it on your piano. Even though it's guitar music, you can still play these notes on a piano. The end.